All right, Justin, thanks. Again, like done a few of these things, so it's good. It's good stuff. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. And when I was thinking about like what we want to talk about when it comes to program development or those sorts of things, I've done a lot of different things, a lot of different ways. I've screwed a lot of things up, and like Justin said, I think they're things that aspiring head coaches or even current head coaches. I just love listening to this kind of stuff. And this is really a collection of ideas that have kind of morphed throughout the years, and they've been done different ways in a similar fashion, but in a different fashion over the years. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I believe about leadership development and captain selection, and why I've done it this way over the years, and I hope it'll make sense. Obviously, contact information is there, and I'll put it back up at the end too. Hit me up on Twitter. That's my cell phone. You can text me or call me, email. If you want this, I'll send it to you. All easy stuff. But so here we go. So first thing I want to do, and I'm going to throw a little promotional thing out there on this. If anyone is familiar with this, it's great stuff. If you're not, you should look it up. It's called The Program. And it's a group of guys that are former military guys, special forces and that kind of stuff, that have created a company that works to build better leaders and more cohesive teams. And they've worked with, programs across the country, high school, college, pro. They do different variations of their training. I've had my teams do a couple of different variations of their training, and a lot of the stuff that I kind of think of kind of came through conversations with their founder, Eric Kapitulik, who's got an amazing story. If you go to theprogram.org there and look at it, it's fantastic. It'll cost you a nickel and a dime now. It's not inexpensive. But I think if it was something that your booster club or you have budget for to do some sort of leadership development, even if you did this once every 3 or 4 years, I think it's invaluable, and the kids will absolutely love it. Our guys just thought it was fantastic. If you look on YouTube for Endicott College Meets the Program, you can see the stuff that they were doing with us. Our GA made a great little film. So it's good stuff, and it'll kind of, come back around again and again as I talk about stuff. But, here's the driving factor, right? Final whistle of the last game of the year just went off. Most, if not all, of your captains have played their last game. Now what? I think we have to be proactive in our development of leaders in our program so that doesn't ever become a giant vacuum. Even when, I'm at the high school level now, I was at the college level for 27 years and 17 of those as a head coach. At the high school level, my guys are going to play basketball. They're going to go, into the weightlifting program. They're going to go play hockey, whatever it is. They're not just in the football program 12 months out of the year. So, how do you kind of develop a system so that you can have leadership that doesn't just come from the top, but it's kind of permeated through your program so that it's constantly kind of like oil, it bubbles to the surface, and the cream rises to the top, whatever your euphemism, right? But I think you have to have a program for that. So this is kind of what, over the years, we've come up with. Once the season ends for us, we start right away with leadership development. And this was a lot easier to do at the college level, but it's not impossible to do at the high school level. And maybe your postseason, maybe it's at the end of the spring after baseball's over and you want to kind of get them ready for the summer. Whatever your timeline is for you, I think it's important to discuss these things. So the first thing we talk about is what the team believes the most important characteristics of a leader are. And that's great stuff because it's interactive and you can have discussions, break them into small tables with your assistant coaches, do it in the auditorium or a classroom where you're throwing the stuff up on a board, however you choose to do it. Just talk about what those characteristics are, what they think leaders are. Now, of course, we have what we think or know leaders to be in our back pocket, and we're going to sprinkle those in as we go through so that everything kind of mixes. But I think you want to let the guys have some say in kind of what they think about that. It's really important. We discussed the challenges of leadership and the power of influence. So the challenges of leadership, I had a captain years ago tell me I did not get $1 or get one date because I was the captain of the football team. He goes, it was hard. And, that was his reflection at the end of it, that it was hard work. It was thankless. It was selfless. And so we wanted to kind of talk about some of the challenges that they were gonna have down the road. And I would always do a postseason breakdown with the the captains that just finished, and say what was tough, what was easy, what were the challenges, and we kind of came up with, I think, 5 things that were really challenging. So I'll show you those. And then the power of influence. I think leadership is influence, and I'll show you that. And I think it's important for them to understand what that is. I've also had the team vote on who they think are influential in their class. So the freshmen vote for who they think the most influential guys in their class are, and we let them kind of assign numbers to them from 1 to 10. How influential is Bob? And they say, well, he's a 9. And then you got to go through these things. And you can actually do a little math. And I'm not a math guy, but one of my coaches was. And we actually had an influence factor, that this kid is this percent influential with his team, with his classmates. It just kind of shows you who the ringleaders are. Sometimes we know, sometimes we don't, but it's kind of a neat process, and another thing that you can do with the team as a group. We use characteristics of leaders to create job descriptions. So actually, we feel that captaincy, or being a team leader, is a job. So we kind of create job descriptions for them, and then create and have opportunities for potential leaders and captains to actually lead before the season. So I'll show you kind of how all that works. So those are the things we talk about as soon as the season's over. So we kind of get things cranked up and get them thinking towards how the team is going to be built for the next season. So, here's the operative question. Which one of these babies is the leader? And the bottom line is that I think that leaders are made, they're not born. And again, you can tell me I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. I think that you have to teach leadership. And, the biggest thing that I would get a lot of times when I was coaching college football is I'd get kids that were team captains would come to me, and then I'd ask them to tell me like how much leadership training that they got. And it wasn't that much. Some places that run good programs do this stuff. And I would get a kid that's a little more polished, and I'd get a kid that was just like, yeah, I just got elected captain, or I got appointed captain, and that was it. And they had no idea on how to lead. So it's really important that we understand that we're going to make these guys into leaders. They're not just going to show up as a leader. All right. So here's some of the things. So that slide was a little premature. I'll go back. To me, leadership is 3 things. Leadership is vocal. All right. And this is going to ruffle feathers. Leadership by example is a total myth. There's no such thing, in my opinion, of a leader by example. I think there's great examples. I think there's kids that are 10 by 10, 5 by 5 kids that do it right all the time. They show up early, they leave late, they do everything that you want them to do and maybe more. But if that kid doesn't open his mouth, he can't lead. And I'll explain why. The second thing is, like I said, leadership is influential, and that is good and bad. Because we have guys that are totally influential, and they're not going to be the guys that you want as your team leaders, but they have influence over the team. And so I think that for all the good influential kids, that's awesome. Those are the guys you want leading your guys, but you better have an idea of who's influential that maybe is, getting sent to the principal's office now and then, or maybe not exactly the right kid to be leading your football team. You want to be aware of the influence of that kid, because that's leadership just in a negative form. All right. And I'll show you that. And then I think leadership is taught. We have to show them how to lead. We have to give them opportunities to fail in their leadership before it really, really, really matters and games are on the line. So, going back here, just talking about that leaders must be vocal. Leaders, of course, have to be good examples, but they need to be able to communicate to get their teammates to follow them. And being vocal does not mean that they have to be loud kids or rah-rah kids. Just because a kid is quiet doesn't mean that he's not a good communicator or vocal. But sometimes the best leaders are quiet, but they still are vocal, and so my 2 examples in here that I always relay back to guys as we talk, because you'll get pushback on this one that, I'm not a vocal guy, but I'm the best leader on the team. And, I had a guy that played for me at Bowdoin College who, was a kid that really loved to ask questions. He loved to challenge, and he did it in an appropriate way. But he said to me, Coach, I totally disagree with you. I think that I'm a great leader by example, and I think that leadership can be done by example. And so I said to him, okay, do you think that I'm a good leader? And he said, yeah, Coach, I think you're a good leader. And I said, do you think that I can show you how to get better as a player? And he says, absolutely. I think you can do that. I said, okay. I got up and I left the room. And I waited I waited 30 seconds or a minute or whatever. And then I walked back in the room and I said, why didn't you follow me? You told me that you thought I was a good coach. Yeah, I did the right things, that I knew how to make you better. Yet when I left the room, I was going out to the field and I thought we'd go out and work some drills and, get better. And it kind of dawned on him that, oh, you never told me that we were going to do that. And I think he just realized that it doesn't have to be banging the drum all the time, but it can be little things where it's just like, you want him in the weight room? Well, your captain or your leader has got to say, hey, Jimmy, we're going to the weight room. Come on, let's go. And it's that simple. And I think that that's what I mean by being vocal. Sometimes the smallest things a leader says to a kid makes the biggest influence in them. So they have to be vocal. So that's my soapbox thing on leadership as an example. Influence, all right, super important. Influence, the capacity to have an effect on the character development or behavior of someone or something. So, action words, effect, impact, control, sway, hold, power, authority, right? Or to have an influence on, to affect, have an impact on, to impact, to determine, to guide. This to me is the essence of leadership. It's being able to influence people to do things that have to be done, even if they necessarily don't want to do it. And so looking for kids that are influential, looking for kids that are, this is where maybe you see some of that leadership by example that kind of bubbles up, is that there's kids that are just, kids want to be like that kid, and so they kind of gravitate toward them. But there's positives and negatives. So I show the guys this. I say, here's positive influence, right? People that are passionate. They love what they do and it shows. They're positive. They take good and bad, but they always find the upside, right? Persuasive, the ability to get others to go along, right? Confident, they're unafraid to take risks. Focused, they keep their eye on the prize. Charismatic, they bring energy to the room. They get others excited. Prepared, they arrive on time and they're ready for the task at hand. Ethical, they mean what they do and what they say. And authentic, they build trust by being themselves. Super positive qualities. And we tell the guys, as we're talking about influence, these are the things that we want you to look for in other people and to develop in yourself. And so they can kind of have a checklist, and they can say, hey, Justin is absolutely super passionate, but sometimes he's not as always positive as he needs to be. But John is super persuasive. Like, he can get anyone to do anything. Like, they'll be able to kind of put these characteristics and qualities and overlay them onto their teammates and kind of be able to kind of say, yeah, he is really positively, influential on me. Or the opposite are negative influence qualities. So the negative parts of influence are, avoiding. They force others to act sometimes against their best interest. They avoid responsibility or conflict. They behave passive-aggressively. Manipulators, right? They influence through lies, deceit, hoaxes, swindles, and cons. Hoaxes, swindles, and cons. It sounds like we're in a 1950s crime movie. But it's disguising one's real intentions or intentionally withholding information that others need to make the right decision. Intimidating. I mean, obviously, we see this it's the preferred technique of bullies, imposing oneself on others, forcing people to comply by being overbearing, loud, abrasive, arrogant, aloof, insensitive, and then threatening, harming others or threatening to harm them if they don't comply. Making examples of someone so others know that the threats are real. Hey, coaches out there, are we using some of these influence negative qualities? I know early in my career, maybe threatening was in there, that we make an example of Tim because I'm going to shoot one and scare 50, and maybe that's not the right thing to do because we're trying to influence our team in a positive way as well also. So positive and negative influence qualities, having them understand what those are. And then that would really be kind of the time that we would say, okay, once we kind of understand these things, we give them a sheet with all the kids in their class and we have them rate them, give them some numbers. And, a kid comes back and you do the math, you say, wow, this kid is like 95%, influential with his class. 95% of the kids in his class rated him influential, or whatever it is. It was really kind of an eye-opener for us because we saw some kids on it that they said were totally influential, that were super quiet and were kind of guys that were kind of in the background when they were around the coaches. So it's a neat exercise to do it. I'd encourage you to try it. It's kind of neat. All right, leadership challenges. So this is the next big thing that we start to talk to the guys about, these 5 leadership challenges. And these were kind of like, you do a lot of reading in leadership books and you see kind of some things that people say. And then we got some feedback from, again, this was feedback from years of captains. And it kind of all fell into these 5 categories, were the things that they were kind of, worried about or found challenging. So the first one, kids have a hard time confronting teammates who are not doing what they should be doing. That might be that is the number one thing. It is hard to get guys to do what you want them to do if they're not doing it, and you don't want to look like a jerk doing it. 2, the coaches are going to hold the captains accountable when things go wrong. So that wasn't my fault. Well, you're the captain. It is your fault. You have to, either you're allowing it to happen or you're telling guys it's okay to do it. It's one of those things. So that was the thing, being held accountable when somebody else screws up. Maintaining the respect of coaches and teammates when they disagree. That's going to happen, right? So there's going to be times where coaches in the team kind of disagree on something, and the captains are right in the middle of it. And that's kind of hard to do because they want to maintain respect on both ends of the spectrum. Some teammates are going to be jealous of their leadership role. We eliminated some of this with our process for captains, which I'm going to go into, but that's going to happen. And then teammates will not always like them or the decisions they make. So, if it puts it on that the captains made the decision to, do some extra running, whatever it is, right? They're not always going to be liked. And so these were the challenges that it's going to happen. It's like weeds in your lawn, right? It's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. So we wanted to make sure that we're addressing these things with the team so that they can then be able to handle it when it pops up. So here's kind of how we take them through it, and we talk to them about it. And this doesn't have to be done all in one session. You could take this as 5 shorter sessions or do a couple and then do a couple later. But I think that when we get down to kind of talking to the guys about this, and this is kind of how we go about it, and it creates conversation. I'd encourage anyone that when you're doing this, don't do it in so much of a leadership, like a lecture style, but do it in such of a way that you're having some ways to have feedback, whether that's stopping things and having the guys give you their feedback or breaking into smaller tables. I find when they sit with the assistant coaches, they start to do this. Because it's hard when dad's in the room. They don't necessarily want to say everything in front of the head coach, but it's something that I would encourage you to do that creates conversation. Breakout rooms in Zoom, right? Send them to a breakout room with a coach, and have them talk about it, and then come back with their findings. So captains find it difficult to confront their teammates. We have to teach them how to constructively confront their teammates. This is always done, I tell them, if you always do things with the team or the program as the central focal point, you have a lot easier time of dealing with teammates that aren't doing what's best for the team. And then remind them that if they don't address the issues like this, drinking, laziness, hazing, cliques, dissension, the entire team is going to suffer the negative consequences. Where I find this is the most difficult for the guys is when a non-leader or a non-captain, or maybe even a leader or a captain, is in the locker room and he's being very vocal in front of other players. Coaches screwing me. I should be playing more. He's a jerk. They got a real, they're really angry about it. And I've told them this is kind of the magic phrase to tell them is, I've always told the team leader, go over to that kid and say, hey, Bob, it sounds like you're really upset here. Why don't you and I go to coach and we'll talk about this? And 9 times out of 10, that guy might still feel the same way. But what happens is he either goes with you and you have a discussion, which happens 1 out of 10 times. The other 9 times he shuts his mouth. And it shows everybody else in the room that you're willing to go with him to have that difficult conversation. So I think that's kind of like a trick that we use with the guys when confronting their teammates is always offer to like, hey, you sound like you're really upset about that. Why don't we go talk to coach together? And then he's got some support going in to have a conversation about something that he's upset about. But that's worked really, really well for me over the years. And for the guys that do take it up, they're great conversations, and they're literally life-changing conversations when guys can do that. Being held accountable, right? We all talk about accountability. but it's overwhelming for captains to know that if someone else screws up on or off the field, I'm going to be held accountable for that with that person. So we try to do the way that we handle this is weekly captains meetings. We actually have council meetings, but weekly captains meeting to help them catch problems early so they can effectively intervene and prevent problems before they blow up. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So trying to teach them how to head things off before things blow up. And that's just having a lot of conversation and really getting the pulse of the team on a very, very consistent and continuous basis, so that it's not just once a month or something like that. We try to do it in the season once a week. In the off season, might not be once a week just because the guys are playing different sports, but we try to get them together. And now with Zoom, it's easy to have a council meeting or have a captain's meeting if you want to do it. So that should be pretty good. And then you got to acknowledge the good actions and decisions they make as well. So it can't always be you're coming down on them or all the bad stuff is their fault too. It's got to be good decisions are a reflection of them as well. So if one of their teammates is doing a really good thing, it's great to go to the captain and say, boy, Timmy's doing an awesome job with that. You guys are leading the right way, and encourage them to do the same thing with the kid. Make sure that you're praising your teammates as much as you're trying to hold them accountable, because it's easier to do one than the other, and one makes the other one easier to do, if that makes sense. All right. Maintaining respect of coaches and teammates. All right. This is a tough one, right? Because the two groups are going to be in conflict in various parts of the season. It just happens, right? It's like it's catch-22. It's between a rock and a hard place, and they have to know how to kind of exist in that space to effectively kind of balance the team. So there's demands placed and expectations on both sides. So like I have talks with my captains about the things that the coaches are really responsible for, and that the expectations that are on us. They need to see that they see it at home, right? They see that they're, if they've got a parent that likes to complain, they see the expectations that are thrust upon coaches for good or bad. And I think that when we can kind of show them that we deal with things just like they're dealing with things, that maybe are expectations that are being thrust upon them that they don't have control over, I think it's a shared responsibility, and it's a shared misery, right? If we're all kind of embracing the suck together, we can kind of figure out how to balance things. It's going to be nearly impossible to please both their peers and the coaching staff. So assistant coaches who sometimes get a little bit more information from guys should encourage captains to speak to the head coach privately about those concerns, because it's going to come down to about decisions, rules, and policies. And as a head coach, I think you have to be open to their input, the captain's input, and you're willing to make some adjustments when necessary. I always said, if it's not going to kill you, what's the difference? You can give in a little bit to them, and the lunatic still will not run the asylum. I also try to do, whenever there's going to be some sort of a team decision that can have options, I try to find options that I can live with, and let the players kind of handle it. I used to be an absolute lunatic about uniforms and what we were going to wear that week and all that. And I just said, why am I killing myself with this? Let the kids pick it, and it just gives them a little bit of ownership, and it's something that they know that we're going to agree on. So little things like that, but you have to be open to a little bit of change. And for an old dog, it's a little bit tougher to learn new tricks, but you can learn them. Some teammates are going to be jealous of their role. What we emphasize with the guys is that leaders who are chosen are in place because they chose to apply and interview for the job of captain. They have earned the respect necessary to do the job. There's an extremely thorough selection process to that. The final decision was ultimately made by a team vote, and everyone had the exact same opportunity to apply for the job. So in our opinion, they should be okay. This one should be easy to kind of take care of because of the process that they went through to become a captain or on the captain's council of our football team. So it's a very fair process. So that usually crushes that one. And then teammates are not always going to like the decisions, going to like you or the decisions that you got to make. And that's just, I think it's a great life lesson. We just want to let them know that they have to stand up and speak out. They have to directly, address issues. They have to be timely with those decisions. All the things that we have to do as a coach, we have to teach them how we go about making those decisions so that when they have to make a similar decision, they can do it. And if you do that, they'll have much more of an influence on the team to head things off at the pass in the locker room, and things will never get to your feet, but never get to your door. The bottom line, if they focus on being liked, you can guarantee they won't be respected. So tell them they don't have to be a prick, but if they focus on being respected, they'll be liked more often than not. And I think that's kind of a key thing for the guys. And then just remind them that I reminded my guys, look, I got your back. I will support you. That's what having your back means. It's going to be, I'm going to support you. And if we're having consistent discussions about things and developing the relationships that we need to have with each other, then it's a great working relationship, and it can be a really, really great experience and opportunity for a kid to be a captain. Because ultimately, captain is just a title. Let's face it. But you can really teach the kid how to grow as a man. It'll prepare him for things, I think, later in life, and ultimately, those will be the kids that come back and you develop a friendship with them later in their life when they become a husband or a father or have a job, or maybe they go into coaching. It's a neat thing. They really can take a lot from this process. So the next thing we do, so we've done all that, right? We kind of lay it out to them. This is what leaders are. This is what you think leaders are. Here's the key things that we think. Here's the challenges with being a leader. They haven't even been elected captain yet. They haven't even applied. They haven't done anything yet. We're just laying it out there that it's not all roses. Then what we do is we create what I call a leadership lab. And this can be anything you want it to be. And I know that when I started doing this, not a lot of teams were doing the off-season competition stuff and having points and all that other stuff. Now, everybody does some version of it, and it's awesome, right? We all have a way to do it. There's things that you like doing. There's things that I like doing. But I just consider that a leadership lab. Come up with whatever that competition is, or whatever your standards of performance are, or your weight room, thing, or your off-season thing, whatever it is. But then, you can do the thing that, people do the drafts, and that's cool and all that other stuff. I've done it, live draft where people see people drafted. I've done closed drafts. I've assigned teams to guys. I've had coaches be assigned to a team, and they help the captain of that team pick the team. 1,000 ways to do it. All good stuff. Love to talk about it. But ultimately, you're dividing into smaller teams led by potential captains. So again, we have not done an election yet. None of that has happened. What I want to do is I want guys to step up and say, Coach, I want to be a leader on this football team. I think I might want to be a captain. I'm willing to be an off-season group leader. My buddies in the military would say we used to call them, and we still do something, we call them fire teams, right? If you have 4 or 5 guys with one guy being a leader, that's a fire team. The smallest unit in the military that can accomplish a mission, that's kind of a fire team. So we would break down into smaller groups. When I had bigger teams, the teams were larger. When I had smaller teams, the teams were smaller. Maybe on a big team, you got more potential leaders. Whatever the number comes out, if you got 100 guys on your team and you have 10 leaders, you got 10 groups of 10, right? That's easy. But I'd encourage you to try to keep the teams smaller if possible, because you don't want to overwhelm the guys with the responsibilities, because this is how they're going to learn how to lead. This gives guys opportunities to lead in a lower pressure environment. Now, as coaches, we know, right? Off season is high pressure because that's when you're building your team. But in terms of the kids' minds, the games are the most important thing. That's when the captains really come out, and that's when their leadership's going to have to show up. So to me, I always felt it was lower pressure in February for the guys to make sure the guys are lifting weights, or making sure that they're going to study hall, or making sure that they're doing their community service. They're leading their team, so that I can look at, we let them name the team, so you can look at the team and say, oh, here's the 89ers were a team that they had one year because the school was founded in 1889, and the 89ers are in the lead because they've got all these points, and this is what they're doing. And the guys are always going to check that. So, but it gives them a chance to check in with all their guys, and then I could say, geez, the 89ers are in last. Why is that? Well, meet with that kid. Let's find out what's going on. It's also a way that you can ask the guys on the team, how are things going? And you can get some feedback on how that kid is particularly doing. This gives the coaches and the team a chance to see the leaders in action before ever having to select the captain. Okay. The way that I've kind of gravitated toward it is that I really felt that when I was in college football, it was kind of like the end of the season up until spring ball was kind of our off-season lab, And then I used to like to have captains elected as we went into spring football. It just kind of was a nice break point for them to be able to do that. The captains are set, and then you're off to the summer. I would do that, but then the last school I was at, we had a bunch of guys that it was like the school's culture that there was a lot of foreign study kids. So they were going to leave for a semester and wouldn't be there their junior spring. Created a different set because we didn't have Zoom and all that. It created a different set of challenges for a kid to be able to lead an off-season group from like Italy. But what you find is that the really good ones figure out a way to do it. And so what we did is we changed the date of captain election to we did it in August and announced them when they came back for preseason camp. And I used the summer, which would be more similar to what I do now with a high school team. I use the summer as my lab time. You know, when spring sports are over, then we kind of get into our football lab. What I would do there is I would ask the guys, how many guys think that they want to be a captain? And so let's say 10 guys say they want to be captains. Well, then I make sure they understand we're going to have leadership activities throughout the summer. Usually it's about once every 2 weeks they have an assignment to follow through. They might be leading a small group. It might be a reflective essay. It might be getting some feedback on what we want in the players package for when they come back. What's the design on the sweatshirt, whatever it is. We let them kind of go through some of those things. Some of the things the guys write that would be shared with the team as well. So we kind of let them know kind of what's going on. But about every 2 weeks there's a lesson, and we deliver it. We delivered it electronically. It was easy to do. I was able to get things back and then have individual conversations with guys about what they wrote. And these in general are kind of like program questions, trying to figure out what they think about the football program. It allows them to make suggestions and offer their opinions. And by the time we're ready to select captains, we really have a well-rounded picture of each kid. And we know the positives and negatives of that kid, and he knows the positives and negatives of being a leader. It really kind of gives us some time to kind of do it, and it doesn't feel rushed. So then our next big thing, and this was something that we went to when I was the head coach at Endicott College. We kind of elected in a traditional way. It was kind of like at the end of the season or at the beginning of the off-season program or the end of the off-season program, we'd have a vote, and you'd vote for your captains, and you'd get your captains. And, if you don't do anything like this, you get what you get, and you can't really get upset about it. But I found like we had some really good groups of captains that just happened. But then I got the one bad one, right? And he's the best player. He's one of the best players on the team. And he's got absolute influential powers over the guys. He's the loudest voice in the room, which tends to get heard the most, right? And he was saying all the wrong things. So it really kind of forced me to kind of sit back and figure out how I wanted to do this. And so this was probably back, I'm going to say, early to mid 2000s. And this is what we decided to do, that we were going to have an application, an interview, and a vote process so that we could try to get down to the best captains possible. And so if we've gone through all this training, then we unleash this on them, right? So they have to apply to be captain. And anyone on the team can want to be a leader and volunteer for that. Anyone on the team can vote, can apply to be captain. Now, I have had it that you have to complete the training process to apply. I've had waivers on that where maybe a kid is transferred in or something like that. But in general, you had to go through the leadership process to be able to apply to be captain. But you could be a freshman, and if you want to apply and go through the process and do everything, God bless you. And I had guys do that. I had guys go through this process for years before they got elected captain, and it was really good for them. But anyone can apply. Year does not matter. All they have to do is fill out the captain application. The application is made up of very specific questions related to your school or team. So I would steer away at this point because we've already done a lot of general stuff, and I get really specific. So maybe it's issues that your school has, that your town has, that the team has had. For new coaches, it's awesome because you find out what's really, really wrong. But you can really ask a very pointed and specific question and get hopefully a very pointed and specific answer. So if, 1 year we kind of felt as we were going into this that we had a problem with guys, that were drinking. It'd be Thursday night before a Saturday game, and guys were still feeling that they wanted to drink beer. College kids, Thursday night, big night out. and the guys were still going out and partying, and they wanted to make that a change. So that was something specific that we asked, like how you would handle that. And it's great because you can get unbelievable feedback from kids on really, really tough subjects, and you get their opinion and you kind of know what they think, and it helps you lead them, helps you counsel them. The applications are then reviewed by a committee. So whatever you want to make your committee up to be, but it can be a combination of anybody. I found the best committees that I ever had a couple of coaches. I usually would have like the coordinators would be on the committee. And then I wanted someone from athletic administration, maybe an assistant athletic director or our compliance person, someone like that, or your faculty rep or a favorite or a teacher, a respected teacher at the school. I had the director of campus safety on mine 1 year. I had the dean that was in charge of the dean of students that was in charge of all the disciplinary stuff on it. Former captains. I invited a former captain back 1 year to sit on the committee for the interviews. And that was really amazing. A kid that I thought did a great job. Whatever you want it to be, you form your committee. So when, these are just some questions, and actually the best questions that I have, I ask the former captains what they think the best questions are to ask the next group of captains. And you'll get some really good ones and some tough ones and some softballs, but they're all good. But these were general leadership questions. You can go back and download this and pause it and but these are very general ones. I'd encourage you to really get specific on your school and on your kids. It makes for a much better discussion. But once we get to the interview, so we have them all apply. We all read their applications. I've never not interviewed a kid that's put in an application. I've always included them and given them an interview if they took the time to fill out the application. We have not taken every interview to the ballot, but we have taken everyone into the interview. So each coach has their list of questions, or each person on the committee has questions they like to ask. We kind of talk and we kind of make sure that we're not asking the same questions, but we try to tailor questions to the individual candidate as much as we can. Each coach has a copy of the candidate's application to review beforehand. The interview is confidential. We shut the door. What happens in there stays in there, so players and coaches can freely exchange information and opinions. The interview can be really intense, and kids can really get nervous. You got to take that into consideration, that maybe if a kid's stammering, it doesn't make him a bad candidate. It's a nerve-wracking process. The interview is very candid. The candidate is asked challenging questions related to football leadership, their own personal values, and their answers are going to reveal their commitment to the program's values. So, I've had some amazing interviews. I've had some guys just blow it. I've learned a lot about my players and my leaders through this process. Stuff that you thought you knew everything about a kid, and something comes out in this that's really kind of shows you what he's made up of, and it's a great process. It's an absolutely great process. Really tough on the kids, but really we'll get you a kid. We'll get you a captain that really understands what's going on. Now,
hey, Coach, real fast, Coach.
Yeah,
no, I love all this stuff. With the interview, and I apologize if I missed it, but are you requiring them? Obviously, they're coming in there, they're getting ready for their interview. Are you requiring them to is there a certain dress requirement that they have to do?
I never put it on them. I wanted to see what they would do.
Okay. Yeah.
So I had kids come in a suit, and really go that extra mile. I had some kids that, because of where it was in their day, they were coming from the gym, and it's kind of it's up to them. And it's interesting sometimes. You see the kid put the tie on, you're like, all right, but certainly if you wanted to kind of have them do that as part of it, I think that's awesome. If you say, hey, treat it like a job interview, how would you dress for a job interview, and see what they come in with.
Yeah, no, that's what I was curious, man. I love that idea. Appreciate that, Coach.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so the ballot. So this is where it gets interesting, right? So we've gone through this whole process. We've decided who's going to move from the interview process to the ballot. Now, again, I think I might have left one or two kids off the ballot over the years. He's got to say something horrible in the interview for us to go, there's no way we can have this kid be part of this. Because remember, he's gone through a long process of leadership development. He's had plenty of times to just blow it and drop out, or just screw something up. He's gotten to this point. He's done a good interview, and I promise you, if you have 10 kids do this interview, every single one of those kids is going to have something really significant to say that you're going to reach over and write down that he said it. And you're like, we need to think about that in our football program. And it's going to be a kid you didn't expect. And you're like, that kid's got something to say. Maybe he's just super quiet, or maybe he's not the best player on the team, but he's got value. We need to kind of keep building that up. So we have an open discussion on the process after the interviews. So when they leave, we sit down, we kind of talk about the kid, we write down some notes, we keep that while we're fresh in our mind. The committee then takes into consideration all their things, the performance, their interviews, overall leadership ability, and then they can make a recommendation. Most times we're sending the entire group to the ballot. So the ballot comes up, and those are the kids that are eligible to be voted on for captain. So you got to get to this point for the ballot. Now the vote. So we would do this as a team. I would put up the names on the whiteboard or on the video screen, and I'd say, these are the guys that have gone through the process. Most of the guys on the team have received things through the course of the leadership thing that these guys have written. So they've had a chance to write. They've had a chance to work with them. They've had a chance to see how they interact with other kids. The guys know that they know that the microscope is on them the whole time. So it's really great to kind of see that the guys are really kind of looking at each other and thinking about the values. We'll go back through the things that we think are leadership characteristics that are important. We'll go back through that because the team decided that. Then they vote. So I give them a piece of paper, and you can decide how many guys you want them to vote for. I usually would have them vote for 2 guys, right? And then if we had more than 2, that's great. If we had a single captain, whatever. But they have to own their vote. So at the top of the ballot, they have to put their name. So there's no blind voting. If you submit a vote without your name on it, it's thrown out. No matter how good or bad the comments are, we toss it out because it's not owned. All right, that's hard for kids because everybody wants things to be done. How many coaches in the room, put your hand up, hate the process of the anonymous coaches critique that we do every year? It's ridiculous. If a kid's got a problem, put his name down. We'll talk about it. But kids won't do that because they think we'll hold it against them. But anyway, they got to own their vote. So they put their name on it. We also tell them no self-voting. Kids will vote for themselves if you let them. It's crazy. They have to include a reason they're voting for that particular individual. All right. And the reason can't be he's a great player or he's our best player or he won the state championship game for us with that play in the fall. It can't be that. We want them to think hard about why that person would be a good captain. So those comments that come back in are generally well thought out. Kids that really do think about it, they're really insightful into the kid that they're voting for. And again, gives you another layer of insight into your players that you would not normally have. This might be just a freshman football player. I remember one kid, we had a transfer, came in as a sophomore, and he voted for a guy one year. I'll never forget this. He said, he immediately came up to me, and he was the guy that welcomed me to the team and told me that I could always come and talk to him. And he had no other motivation to do that other than, he was a classmate of mine. And so that kid ended up becoming a captain. He was a great listener. But that's an example of the vote. So the vote comes in, and then we make our final selections. So we count the votes just like everybody else counts the votes, right? I've never been a guy to say, like, I've heard some coaches, you get 10 points. You can put all 10 behind one guy. You can do this. I think the comment is the key, of letting them kind of really make a thoughtful decision about why they elected that guy, why they want that guy as their captain. Teams still, we're going to vote best players. That's avoidable. Performance is important. I think a lot of teams might generally tend to vote across positional lines. The O-line wants the senior tackle to be the captain. I mean, that's natural, but at least this kind of breaks down some of those barriers. Player comments are used to break ties and determine the final number. So if we said, these 2 guys, let's say we wanted 3 captains, which I think is the magic number, right? Let's say there's a tie. We want to look at that fourth kid. The 3 and 4 are tied. So you got the 2 kids that are clear, and then you got 3 and 4 kind of close. And you're like, well, what do we do with that? It's a tie. Well, let's read the comments and see if it breaks the tie, or maybe it says we should keep both of them. So again, we're using the players' own comments to help us make decisions as a coaching staff. Because the players can vote, but I got all the votes, right? That's just how it works. But you have to have a really transparent system, or else they'll see you fixed it. So the blend that I think you're looking for is the ability to listen, to be vocal. So that's being a communicator, to be vocal, and to enforce the standards and values of the team. I don't think that each individual needs to have all three of those characteristics, but as a group, they do. And so these are the things that the coaching staff kind of works on as as the numbers start to kind of spread out and you're trying to figure out where you need to kind of put your support behind so that it works. So this is the last group of captains I had when I was the head coach at Endicott College, right? So Jake Cox, Mike Marini, and Luke Summers. So in this group, here's Jake Cox. He was the kid that was the great listener, right? He's a guy that really could kind of take the pulse of the room. Guys on the team would come to him to talk. And so he was really a great listener. Summers, the other one standing behind, and Cox was a great defensive back, multiple-year starter, all-conference kid. Luke Summers was a special teams guy for us, but the most well-respected guy on the team. And so he was a captain, and he was the guy that was the communicator. He would take it all in, and he could communicate to everybody. It's not that Jake and Mike couldn't. It's just that Luke was the best at it. And then Marini, he was my enforcer, right? He's the guy that could be a prick when he needed to be a prick. He's the guy that you were a little scared of because he could fly off the handle. Now, was he a good leader? And could he just break it down and communicate things? Sure. But in that group, it was like that was the perfect blend, And I got other captain groups that I went back and I looked at all the guys and I was like, this is kind of the blend. I just took the last groups that I had. Here's the last group of captains I had at Bowdoin College, right? AJ Mansalillo and Joey Gowetzky and Cam Rondo. Now, they're walking out with these two team impact kids. These kids have these awful, like, congenital problem with their ears. Sweet kids. If you ever get an opportunity to get involved with team impact or a similar group that kind of takes a kid into your program, it'll change your players' lives. It's really amazing. So if I look at this one, right? Cam, number 8, was the listener. Joey was the communicator, and AJ was the fiery, the enforcer. They all had these same abilities. They all had a little bit of it in them, but one of them's going to dominate in the other. So there you go. There's a perfect blend. That was a really good group of guys, right? And then here's the guys that I had this year. So we decided to go with 4 because there was a close vote for 3 and 4. So looking at this group, right? You've got. This was interesting because you've got Sam, 12, our quarterback, who was the listener. He was great in the locker room, listening to guys, and he would know what the opinion of the team was. 52 was our fiery guy. He was a defensive lineman and an offensive tackle, and he was the guy that was your hard worker. He could get the guys to toe the line, so he was great. And then 8, Wes Pierce, who's going to Middlebury, he was the guy that was the communicator. He made sure that everybody was doing what they were supposed to be doing. He could communicate exactly what was going to happen. Now, what was interesting is 35 is probably the best overall football player, but he was a junior. And this is what happens. Your junior captains will tend to take a seat if they have senior captains. So Sam was a little quieter than I liked him to be, but I think he was learning on the job and it was new. I think he's going to be a great senior captain. So again, you're talking about a blend of characteristics. Those are the 3 characteristics I think your captain group has to have. And it doesn't matter how many you have. They just have to have that combination. If you got one kid that can do it all, that's great. But typically it's a group. Now, don't forget the guys that were not selected. All right, I think this is a mistake that sometimes we make as coaches, is that we discount the fact that, or we think that, well, we got 3 captains, they're our leaders, and we forget about everybody else. If they went through the process, they're invested, right? They're invested. They've been trained, and we said, because we went through the process, we put them on the ballot, that we were okay as coaches with them becoming a captain of our football team. So I don't want to throw out all that good hard work. And what ends up happening is we kept them as a captain's council. So if I had 10 guys apply to be captain and then we had 3, the other 7 were invited to be part of the captain's council. It's a nice little consolation prize. They can put it on their resume, all that other stuff. But that becomes a bigger group for us to meet with. And what generally happened is, because we encourage younger players to participate in the process, we are going to get some guys at the other levels. So you can be top down with your leadership and be very top heavy, or you can have it kind of permeate all the levels of your program, all your classes, and not just the seniors. And that helps you kind of have some guys. Now, in a high school football program, I'm not expecting a freshman or a sophomore to end up, as a captain, let's say. But maybe that really good sophomore that goes through the process, maybe he's a great freshman player for you. He goes through the process. But more likely than not, you're going to find yourself having some juniors that are going to kind of filter into that group. And maybe if you get a sophomore, but it allows you to have somebody like 35 for me that has already been through it. He kind of understands what I'm looking for, and now he's going to be even more prepared to go to the next level. At the college level, I would absolutely have freshmen apply, and if they didn't make it, then I had a guy in there that was going to be a leader, until he became a captain. So I had a kid, Marcel Cooper, who applied for it as a freshman, sophomore, didn't get it, but then as a junior, he was on the council, and then as a senior, he was a captain. So, it works out pretty well. Why do we do it this way? All right. Number one, well, I'll tell you, there's a story behind it. So, when I was coaching at another school, we had a group of captains that were tremendous football players. And there was one kid in the group that was what I thought the best of them all. He was a big tackle, 6'4", 310 pounds, was a great player. And what happened was we had kind of a strange group. It was 4 guys, and 2 of the guys I would say fit into that maybe negative influence category, very influential, got voted captain, but maybe weren't the guys that we wanted. And then we had 2 guys that we really thought were going to be great captains that were the right influence guys, but the other one was our fullback, and he was really quiet. So what happened was we had 2 loud guys that were maybe not as positive, and all the pressure went on our tackle. And I saw him just kind of, strain under the pressure of it that was put on him because we just said, here's a piece of paper and vote. So he was forced into the situation. And I really think he underperformed as a senior. He didn't have the year that he wanted to have because I saw the emotional and the pressure that it put on him. So this really kind of solves some of those problems. Number one, it eliminates guys that just want the title. They're all out there. Everybody wants to be a captain until they have to go do something they don't want to do. So I want to eliminate those guys. They want to wear the badge, but they're not going to enforce the law. We don't want them as a captain, right? Eliminate those that want the title. Eliminate the great player who really doesn't want to be a captain. I had a kid after we started doing this process. I was shocked. He was such a good player for us. He was a great kid. I was shocked he didn't apply to be captain. And I sat down with him, and he said, Coach, I'll be a good guy in the locker room for you. I always got your back. I'm always going to make sure that things are being done right. I just don't want to be the captain. I don't want that responsibility. And so you might think that's a negative. I thought that was a positive. The kid really knew himself, and he was awesome for us. Never a negative thing to say about the kid, and he was really a great leader in the locker room anyway. It encourages those that want to be a leader. So a kid can do this that might have no chance, but he really wants it, and he wants to learn more, and he's really invested in your program. It doesn't hurt to have that kid go through the process. And then here's the key thing, guys. It eliminates complaints about who was or was not elected captain. It is a super fair process because everybody has the same opportunity to go through the process. That was so key for us because now when you get that parent or you get that kid that comes in and says, why wasn't so-and-so elected captain or why wasn't I elected captain? Well, it all comes down to a team vote in the end. So the process played itself out. I had a guy that was a great captain for me when we first did this, the very first year that we did this. And he said, I think that this guy would be a great captain. And because he's not applying, he doesn't get to be a captain. And I said, but you're applying and you're going through all the process. Do you see why maybe he's a great guy, but maybe he shouldn't be captain? And I think it made sense to him at that point. So kind of an interesting thing of why we do it. Again, leadership reminders, being a captain is an extremely challenging role. And at the end of the day, it's a title. You have to be, a leader is a leader. You have to take personal ownership. You can't lead others unless they first find their own voice, being vocal. They have to be able to kind of understand how they're going to communicate. They have to exhibit commitment to the core values of the team, themselves, the team, the athletic department, the school, the community. All those things are going to come before you. Understand that leadership can be learned, experienced, and improved. I think we have to understand that. Learned, experienced, and improved. They can always get better. Peer leadership is needed through thick and thin. Peer leadership is even more necessary during adversity to keep the team on track. I don't think that speaks louder than what's going on right now. Focus internally by staying vocal, visible, and positive at all times. That's what I tell the guys. Be vocal, visible, and positive. And then focus externally by constantly communicating with your teammates. You know, you can't say enough to them and listen enough to them on a day-to-day basis if you're going to be a captain. So the process summary, leadership needs to be developed step by step. Not everybody can be a leader or a captain. The captains are always going to be on representing the program on and off the field. Respect is always earned and not given. That's a big thing. If you want to have a great discussion with your team, talk about what it means to have respect. You get a lot of interesting conversation about that. And know the challenges the captains are going to face, and we're going to help guide them through that. So that right there, guys, is my bit. I think I went right up to the hour. But if you want to talk at all about it, like I said, I've done it a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different things that you can do with it. There's a lot of things that I didn't include in here that are little minutia things that are good stuff. But I'm more than willing to talk about any of it. If I got something I can send you, I'll send it to you. So feel free to, like I said, shoot me an email, shoot me a text, hit me up on Twitter. I love doing this stuff. And Justin, I really appreciate the opportunity to do these things. It has made this time awesome.
No, for sure, Coach. I love the presentation. I was texting my head coach just in regards to the whole choosing the captains and everything. So and I just asked, if I could potentially set you guys up for you to have a conversation with them. So I'll definitely let you know, because I think that's awesome. I mean, you go through, everybody has their own ways of choosing captains, but I just I feel like while that process obviously is a little more extensive, like, it's teaching them such valuable lessons beyond football. You know what I mean? And then for you, right, you're able to gauge and get all this information from what their feedback is or what their answers are. And it's so valuable. So
it's like you can peel away all these layers, right? But there's stuff that we just can't get to.
Right.
And that's that underclassman makes that comment about the kid of something that you had no idea that happened, that positively influenced that kid in such a way. Like, I would keep those sheets, and it'd be like, I'd pull them out every now and then, to love a kid up and be like, hey, look what Justin wrote about you. I didn't even realize you did that. And there's some things that, quite frankly, and we do this all the time as coaches, that'll choke you right up, that you can't even believe your kid did that. So it's a lot of work, but if you spread it out, right, that can take place over the course of almost an entire year. True. So to me, I liked it because I could just control that process. I wasn't feeling overwhelmed by it. And I didn't have a guy that I then had to uncover all the crap about, and he's already been named captain. There's nothing I can do about it.
Right. And another aspect I like was, for that interview process, getting other people in the school involved.
Yeah.
What a great way to get, the school behind you, whether it's, and I mean, obviously that should be the case anyway, but teachers and they want to feel involved in the football program. Right. So, I mean, what a way, I mean, and, like as a teacher, right. I mean, how, you kind of take that sense of like ownership a little bit. Like, I mean, how cool is that you helped choose the captains for the football team? Like, that's so cool. So
I had the head of campus safety.
Yeah.
And so you make a friend with somebody like that, he'll come back and he'll tell you, hey, your guys were helping me out on this. And then he knows this. He knows that it's Saturday night and JB and Justin are out, at that party, and things are getting a little out of control. He knows he could go up to us and say, hey, can you guys just try to get them to diffuse this thing? And he developed allies through football, and the guys didn't look at him as the bad guy anymore.
Right.
So it was,
that's one of, and you touched on it earlier, but I think that's one of the more difficult things for these high school kids to have to do, right, is hold others, especially friends of theirs, accountable. And that's just an issue, I think, in a lot of places. And because it's not, for them, it's not, they see that friendship, cool. Right, right. And it's not cool. It's not cool at all. So to get those dudes on board, is so important. So.
And that takes a long time to get that to sink in, that it's like, it's not you being a jerk. It's you putting the team first and then look at it through that lens. And if it still makes sense to you, then you make your decision. But if you're looking through the lens and what your buddy's doing doesn't make sense to you,
right,
right? And there's a lot of other things. Again, like I have a lot of other things that I do with the guys. We talk a lot about the difference between, a brotherhood and kind of friends and family kind of thing, right? And so we do this whole thing, and it's kind of like, the things you'll let your friends do, you would never let your little brother do. Right. And it's kind of getting them to shift their focus to say, that's the approach that we want to have with guys on the team. And, so there's a whole thing that we do on that, which is another whole clinic deal, right? It's just, just getting them to see things through different lenses, because they tend to see things as like, they look at everything, but it's through this little tiny frame. It's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're considering all these things that are out here, but it's this one thing that's happening that they're focusing on. And it's like, yeah.
No, it's awesome, Coach. Like I said, I'm gonna get over my head coach and see when would be a good time, and I'll communicate with you, and kind of we'll get that set up and see what we can do.
Like I said, I'm finally at the time where I got a gray beard. I take pills I don't want to take in the morning. Like I finally have something to offer.
Hey, you know what? You'd probably be surprised from the first time you came on to now, the beard, the growth.
Right? Yeah, I got to go back and look.
You have to go back and check it out. Actually, I just passed along. A coach hit me up about some pass pro stuff. So
yeah,
I pointed it to your clinic talk.
I'm actually going from this right on to a round table with the guys over in the UK.
Oh, nice. That'll be fun.
Yeah, the thing just popped up. So it's funny, like the amount that football has really kind of expanded. I'm doing stuff now. I'm doing clinics for talking with guys in Denmark, or 2 teams in Germany,
yep.
Teams down in Australia.
Yeah, I was about to say a guy in Australia.
Yeah.
No, and you know what? It's just, man, that's what makes the football coaching community so cool, man. And during this time, like, now would that stuff have been going on without all this going on? I mean,
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Not at this capacity, at least.
I mean, and this is the time that every guy that does these things should be kissing your ass, because it's like, if you didn't decide to wake up one morning and go, hey, I'm going to do this, like hundreds of clinics, Justin, hundreds of clinics. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous. We've learned more football through what you're doing than I have in my entire career of going to clinics. So, that's the big put up to you. But, it has opened things up. My connections over in the UK were long established, right? I'm friends with those guys. But these other ones in Germany, these other ones in Australia, like those things are popping up because people are seeing this stuff. Then reaching out.
It's been awesome. And once again, man, just everybody, putting their platforms out there to do that has definitely sparked it.